Hey guys, Aaron Johnson here from Palace of Pistons, and I'm bringing you a bit more of an impromptu video today as some news dropped on Friday morning regarding a new Pistons player being involved in trade discussions, a name we haven't really heard before, not only this year, but really in his entire tenure with the Pistons. So some interesting news came out, and I wanted to be able to break this one down for you guys before the podcast dropped on Sunday, and we had all those clips coming from that. I wanted to get this out in its own unique video before we eventually discuss this player along with other players on our podcast coming out on Sunday. That's going to really preview the trade deadline for the Pistons, but we'll get started here. And on Friday morning, James Edwards III, the Detroit Pistons beat writer for The Athletic, dropped some very interesting news that Luke Kennard, the third-year shooting guard out of Duke, who has really come into his own this season for the Pistons, has been made available in trade talks. It was not something we've heard before. Again, I want to reiterate that there haven't been any other reports that I can remember, not only this season, but throughout Kennard's 2.5 seasons with the Pistons, that he's been available. So this is quite a development, and it's not something that I was really anticipating to hear with where the Pistons are at this point in the season, sitting here a few weeks away from the trade deadline, on the outside looking in at the playoffs and just looking like a team that has no business trying to compete for the playoffs with the way that they go out and play on a nightly basis. So to hear that Kennard is on the market, again, it's news because it's not something that I had ever heard prior to right now, not only this season, but again, dating back to the beginning of his career with the Pistons, that he was on the trade market. So this situation is kind of unprecedented for the Pistons, and quite honestly, it's rather concerning that the Pistons are opening up to trade him, unless they're adding some top-of-the-line player. Then maybe it's a little bit different. Maybe they're able to use him and pair him alongside Andre Drummond, which is something that Edwards alluded to in his piece, is that being something the Pistons could do with Kennard, is use him in a trade with and alongside Drummond. So maybe if they were somehow, some way plucking a Bradley Beal away from the Washington Wizards, or getting another big name, another all-star caliber player back in that sort of trade, which I don't think is possible. I don't think that a team really wants to take on Drummond right now, nor do I think there are that many all-stars available on the trade market. But that's really the only way I see a trade like this presenting any true value for the Pistons, if they're able to get an all-star back who's under contract for the foreseeable future to, retool, not rebuild for next season, so that they can try to compete with Blake Griffin back in the fold and whatever else they're able to do. And if they hold on to Derrick Rose, whatever their roster would look like, by adding an all-star to the team, is if that was their idea, I guess, but I don't see that happening. And if the Pistons were to trade Kennard just because they wanted to start something new, it would really not make any sense. Kennard is 23 years old, potentially your best young player moving forward. I think between him and Sekou Doumbouya, it's a debate. But Kennard has been really good, and he's been really good this season. He's taken a complete new step to his game while he's been given some more responsibility. Through the first 28 games this year, he's averaged nearly 16 points, over 4 assists, over 3 rebounds, nearly at 4 rebounds. So he's basically averaging 16, 4, and 4 on 44% shooting from the field, 40% shooting from beyond the arc, and 90% shooting from the free throw line. Those are great numbers for a third-year player that is just now starting to be given some of the true responsibility and given some of the real development possibilities that have been laid out for his potential future in the years past. So Kennard has taken the opportunity and run with it this season. It's definitely unfortunate that he's been injured again. Kennard has been out since December 21st with bilateral knee tendonitis, so not having him for the past couple of months has been incredibly hard for the Pistons. We've seen it in their play, and not having him for this past month has really affected what they've been able to do. And, I think at the time that Kennard initially was brought onto the injury report, it was thought that it was going to be maybe a couple weeks at the most, and he was reevaluated on January 7th, but we're here now at the beginning of February, and he's still not back. So certainly his absence has played a role, in the Pistons mounting so many losses, and that's been incredibly tough. But getting him back on the court certainly would help, and he's a guy that you're building with for your future. When you look at the Pistons core, the first name that comes to mind should be Luke Kennard and maybe Sekou Doumbouya, and then after that you think of a Bruce Brown, you think of a Svi Mykhailiuk, you think of a Christian Wood, but Luke Kennard is kind of synonymous with the Pistons' future. It just always seemed like he was part of it. And for the people that are concerned with maybe he doesn't fit Sekou's timeline, he's already 23, Sekou just turned 19, then the Pistons really might need to wait a few years to start getting involved in the draft. They're not going to be able to draft the youngest player every year, and if they draft a 21-year-old this year, is he going to be off of Sekou's timeline because he's a few years older? Or a 22-year-old, is he going to be off of Sekou's timeline? Not every year are they going to be able to draft the youngest player or one of the youngest players in the draft, and the 4-year difference really doesn't do that much for me. Kennard just turned 23 as Sekou just turned 19. And if you keep going through this cycle where this guy is a little bit too old for your future moving forward, especially when a guy is just 23 years old, how are you ever going to get into your rebuild in a full sense if you're always moving on from guys that you thought were part of your future and have been said to be part of your future? In all honesty, how do you do that? Because is there going to become a point in time where Sekou's too old to be considered part of the future if the Pistons haven't started winning yet? Are Svi and Bruce Brown going to face the same jurisdiction? Those are questions that have to be answered. I mean, it's something that has to be looked at. If that's the mindset of thinking, Mykhailiuk is already 22 years old. Is that too old to start a rebuild with a guy that's 22 years old? I don't know. I mean, I guess that's a subjective question, but I don't think so whatsoever. And for Kennard to be talked about in that sense, it's kind of shocking to me, and something I didn't even think of because I didn't think it mattered that much. He's 23 years old. He's still young. He's not in his prime. He's still got more years to develop and grow into himself as a player. We haven't even seen Sekou and Kennard on the floor together, and I think that's something that deserves to be seen before you just cast away Kennard. Now, I will say, again, if the Pistons are able to get back something of true value, then I guess so be it. I'm not in agreement with the idea of trading Kennard, but if you're able to add some all-star, or you're able to get back, multiple first-round picks and a young player, or some incredible haul for him, then fine. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't think any team is going to want to do that, and I don't think there really should be any team that does do that. I can't think of any team off the top of my head that would go out and give up multiple picks or a big-time young player for Kennard. If a team was interested in Kennard, it would be probably teams that are looking to contend right now and are looking to add a player that can come in and maybe start or be their sixth man off the bench. And I can't see one of those teams having or giving up multiple first-round picks or any of the young players they have on the roster, if there are any of those teams like that. So it's really a slippery slope for the Pistons in this scenario. Again, I was completely caught off guard by the idea that they could trade Kennard, but we'll see how that unfolds with the trade deadline coming up here on February 6th. We're just days away from the trade deadline. And again, I want to source this report coming out on Friday morning via James Edwards of The Athletic. If you are not following him, if you are not subscribed to The Athletic, you are missing out on a great journalist and you are missing out on great journalism. So I highly suggest following James on Twitter. I highly suggest subscribing to The Athletic. It's money well spent, to be honest. The work that they do there between the reporting and the analysis and the interviewing, it's all just so high level, and truly the Detroit Pistons fan base is lucky to have a guy like James as the team's beat writer. But to wrap this video up, just some final thoughts. The Pistons should not be trading Luke Kennard. He's part of their future moving forward at just 23 years old. He's been enjoying a career season before the injury came into play, and with him due back in a few weeks, the team should be excited to get him on the floor to continue to develop chemistry with the young guys like Bruce Brown and Sekou Doumbouya and Christian Wood, and continue to move forward with that. Their focus at the trade deadline should be trading the likes of Andre Drummond, Derrick Rose, Markieff Morris, Langston Galloway. There's another video I made that's up on the YouTube page here. I'll tag it above, that I talked about 5 players that the Pistons should or could be looking to move at the trade deadline. So, and Luke Kennard did not even cross my mind as one of those potential possibilities. But that's going to wrap this video up here today. Hope you enjoyed this content. If you did, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for this week's episode of the Palace of Pistons podcast dropping on Sunday. Thanks so much, guys, and we'll see you next time.